ability to fly, the ability to remain in the air to a large degree depends upon this Bernoulli's principle. And it's really quite simple. If you take physics, there's equations that go along with it and everything else, and that really complicates it. But the concept is relatively simple, and that is the faster that a fluid moves, the less outward pressure that is exerted. And because of the shape of the wing of a bird, a bat, an airplane, air moves faster over the top of the wing than the bottom of the wing. That means that outward pressure is less on top, outward pressure is greater on the bottom, and it's that greater pressure below that's pushing up the wing of the bird, the bat, the airplane. It's pushing it up into that lower pressure air. And that, in a sense, then is, that is creating the lift that keeps that animal in the air. This diagram is good because generally when you show diagrams with streamlines, the closer they are together implies a faster moving air. And so you can see that the streamlines are closer together on the top. The air is moving faster than it is across the bottom of the wing, therefore changing the pressures, lower on the top and higher on the bottom. This one here, like I said, if you wanted to, you could complicate it and add in equations, which we're not doing. But this is the example that I showed you in class. You have the air flowing here. When we come to a constriction, our pressure pushing that air is remaining constant. We're not changing that. So we're moving a certain number of molecules, and when they get to this point, they move faster. And you can see that the streamlines are closer together here than they are there. So in this area, the fluid is moving faster. The outward pressure being exerted by the fluid is less than it would be on the outside of that tube. We mentioned the hose example. That's one. Another one, if you're taking, particularly if you're taking a cold shower, which most of you don't do, but if you're in a shower stall, not a bathtub, but a shower stall, and you've got that water coming down very, very fast on top of you, that shower curtain tends to creep in towards your legs at the bottom. That's Bernoulli's theorem again, Bernoulli's principle. The air is moving, the fluid is moving, and the air inside that shower stall. It's going faster than outside, so there's lower pressure in than there is out. Oh, I can do that too. All right, so here's my cambered airfoil. I know it's not a good example, but it does go up. All right, so if you look at this portion of it, it goes up. Did it go up? All right. There's all sorts of ones you can get online. With the toilet paper works better because it's lighter weight. My other example of Bernoulli's, since I knew I couldn't draw this on demand on the board. Anybody know what that is? All right, so it's springtime, you need to fertilize your lawn or put on insecticide. And you can buy these bottles of chemicals and you just attach a garden hose to it. All right? It's utilizing Bernoulli's principle in order to get that fluid out of the bottle and then onto your lawn. So here's your hose being attached right there. And so the water is going to be coming in. On the inside, you have a constriction, which is going to speed up the flow of the water through that internal mechanism. So at that point, you're increasing the speed, which means you're decreasing the outward pressure. There's greater pressure in the bottle, so in a sense, you're sucking up the fluid that then goes and sprays out onto your lawn. So it's a another practical application of Bernoulli's. All right. It's proud of myself. Okay. All right, then we look at various factors that can increase lift. So all other things being equal, the faster you get the air moving over that wing, the greater is the lift that you are going to create. And that's why a lot, you watch the old World War II movies and the aircraft carrier turns into the wind in order to launch the planes. Because then you have greater total airspeed coming across the wings of the airplanes, giving them that needed lift at the crucial moment when they need to get off that airplane. Camber, the degree of curvature. Individuals can't change this, birds can. Bats can, birds can't. But you do see differences among species. Angle of attack, whether you're coming in like this, or whether you're coming in like that, no angle of attack. If you have a high angle of attack, the air is hitting underneath, and a certain component of that, you can resolve it into vectors. It has a high amount of drag, but there is some lift that comes from that high angle of attack. Aspect ratio, by having long and skinny wings, you reduce the total proportion of the wing that is being affected by air slipping around the tip. So it's going from that high pressure underneath and diluting the low pressure on top, thus destroying the lift at the tip of the wing. But if your wing is very long, that tip doesn't amount to a large proportion of your wing. If your wing is very short, it can be a very large proportion. And then we looked at slotting too. Leading edge slotting, something like the alula, the so-called bastard thumb of the birds, or slotting between individual primaries. Any questions on all that? Okay. All right, we'll continue a little bit with flight. We're moving on to mammals. So what you really have is powered flight. Flapping flight. Distinguished from gliding versus soaring. So in regular flapping flight, powered flight, the bird essentially is using its own internal energy to create the lift and the thrust. Right? It's the muscular action of the bird moving those wings that's going to create the lift and the thrust. Okay? But there are ways that birds can cover ground, move through the air, without exerting their own muscular energy. And those, of course, are going to be gliding and soaring. You all intuitively know what gliding is. You're high up and you're just coming down. That's a glide. The bird is not exerting any energy, but it doesn't just go straight down vertical. Instead, it's going to end up coming down hundreds of feet from where it stopped flapping. So we still have air moving over the wings, therefore we still have lift being generated. That lift is not exceeding the pull of gravity. And so the animal slowly comes down to the ground. But again, if you're high up, you're on a building, high in a tree, and you want to come down to the ground, it doesn't take any muscular energy. You glide down. You're using the energy of your position up in the air to essentially create that lift and thrust that allows you to move over the ground. Soaring is a lot cooler, I think. Because in soaring, a bird is using lift and thrust that is created by moving air. So it's not the animal itself again, but we're going to get lift and thrust simply from the fact that the air is moving. We can have different kinds of soaring. We can have static soaring, slope soaring, and dynamic soaring. Most of you have seen examples of the first two, probably not that third. Okay, what's going on in static soaring? The static or the stasis. It implies that the bird is staying in approximately the same position over the earth. I mean, not exactly one exact point, but the same general area over the earth. It's soaring. In other words, it is maintaining its altitude for a prolonged period of time. It's not flapping its wings, and yet it's staying up in the air. And what birds do when they rely on static soaring is they're relying on rising air currents. So for example, if you have a, let's say a field, and then you have a road, and then maybe you have a forest. When the sun's beating down on those surfaces, they heat up to different degrees. Your roadway, for example, is going to heat up much more rapidly in the sunshine. Well, warm air rises, and that warm air is going to be replaced by cool air from the forest and a little bit cooler air from the field. So in other words, you're continually going to have a column of air rising up over that road. Or maybe it is a newly plowed field that is really brown or really black. And the whole field then is heating up and sucking in air from the surroundings. The point is that it's a somewhat restricted location on the face of the earth that this air is rising up. And the birds can take advantage of that and simply hang in that column of air. And most of you have seen hawks and vultures do this. And a lot of times they'll be circling. Right? They're circling because, yeah, maybe they're looking for food, but they're also circling trying to stay within that rising column of air, which is called a thermal. So we're using the differential heating of the earth that causes air to rise in specific locations. The birds, if they have a good-shaped wing, a wing that can take advantage of this, will be able to maneuver and stay within that column of rising air for a long period of time. Thus, they can stay high in the air without exerting muscular activity, other than they've got to turn their wings and steer a little bit in order to stay in that column. Right? So the air is rising enough to counter the effects of gravity for these birds. Hawks, vultures, crows can do it to a certain degree. Some animals will use static soaring, a version of static soaring, combining it with gliding during migration. So for example, all right, let's say there's your original thermal, and the bird rises up to 10,000 feet, and it's migrating. Well, it can head off in the direction it's migrating till it encounters another thermal. Then it can glide down, encounter another thermal, and go back up. So it's possible to go from thermal to thermal to thermal simply by gliding. And the bird can cover huge amounts of distances with very little energy expenditure. Because gliding's not taking it, and soaring's not taking it. So there's one example of an African vulture. It went 75 kilometers using 6 thermals that reached up to 1,500 meters in altitude. So 75 kilometers that bird was able to travel with essentially no flapping of its wings. That's pretty decent. Okay. Slope soaring. Well, we got to have a slope. Easiest way to envision it. Okay. You have a flat land, it could be water, I don't know, and then a cliff. And you have air movement like that. So air moving along the flat surface encounters this obstacle and is turned upwards. If you're a bird,